In a world that's always changing, there is one thing that never changes: God's unchanging Word. And now, from God's Unchanging Word Studios in New Orleans, we are pleased to bring you news, nuggets, and insights with today's host, Tom Carey.
Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to God's Unchanging Word in another edition for our news, nuggets, and insights. And today is Friday, April 1st, 2022, 4 months into man's new year, but we got God's new year coming up, so stay tuned for that. We're going to begin today with Monument Honors, the LGBTQ2+. Wow, how many more letters can they put in the alphabet? Community. This has been sent in from our viewers from Canada. Got a lot to talk about in that segment. Systematic destruction of America. We talked about this last year. We're going to bring it in 1 year later. And we're going to begin with the Spring Holy Days. The Spring Holy Days coming up really, really fast. Then I've got a special segment coming up today. How many people remember Henry Kissinger? Well, we're going to be talking about that in relationship to preparing for the lean years. So let's begin with this. It is the biblical New Year. I wish everyone a Happy New Year. Excuse me. April 2nd, this Sabbath is Rosh Chodesh, the New Year, is Abib 1, the Nisan 1, the new month, the new moon, and the new year. We got 3 New Year videos for you today, all different, all upbeat, all powerful, focusing on God's new year. Let's play that first one, Jeff. Well, Happy New Year to everyone. All right, let's get right into this program. Canada to build an LGBTQ2+ national monument. This is actually a headline from 2 years ago in 2020. This is what they said. The Canadian government, along with the LGBT Purge Fund, they've called it, is sponsoring submissions for the creation of a new national monument in Ottawa dedicated to the LGBTQ2+. Discrimination and anti-colonialism. Unbelievable. I mean, how far can you take this? This is the reasoning behind it. Between 1950 and the 1990s, the LGBT members of the Canadian Armed Forces, the RCMP, and the Federal Public Service were systematically discriminated against in what became known as the Purge, the LGBTQ Purge. Unbelievable what's going on now. But, you know, there's a new purge coming on, is that if you're not vaccinated in the U.S. military, just like some of the SEAL team members, these people who are dedicated and serve their lives, put their lives on the line all the time. Now you cannot go out on active duty because you haven't been vaccinated. A new wave of controlling people. This is important. This is really, really important. You might think it's just another fluke what's going on here. But you know, Satan he's moving toward the end time. There's an end time merge coming of people to gather together to be able to fight Jesus Christ who's coming back to this planet. So I want you to stick with me now. Stay with me in this segment because I'm going to use a few scriptures now to show you how important this is that we pay attention to the roots. I'm trying to find the right foundation to say this. Into the roots of those who raise up, where it might sound like this is the right thing to do, but when you do this, what you're doing is you're building a foundation to go against what God has declared as evil. That's right. You read the scriptures and you'll see that. All right, so with that said, let's go on now. All right, this is this year. Canada will soon have an LGBTQ2 plus national monument after a winning proposal is announced. 2 years ago, they brought the process. Now they're bringing in the project. It has the appearance of a direct defiance of an example left to us by the Eternal. Now, it looks, it's interesting. It never ceases to amaze me how Satan is able to take what God declares as evil to put such a spin that it always looks so nice. It has such beautiful colors. It has incredible music, and it's supposed to uplift. Amazing how deceptive Satan is. So now, when you look at this picture here, there's a couple things that really come to mind that I'm going to use a few scriptures to describe how defiant this monument is, and probably the reason they chose it. It's called Thunderhead. All right, so I read Thunderhead. Thunderhead is a sculptural pavilion in the form of a thunderhead clown mounted upon a stage that allows space for activities, protests, and performance art. All right, so I thought about that, and I prayed about it. I said, like, I seen this picture somewhere. You got a mountaintop, you got clouds, you got thunders, and a place to speak. Well, there is a place in the Bible. It's found in the Old Testament. But it was God who did this. So what's being done, believe it or not, I don't even know if they know it, but Satan has directed this to create a counterfeit of Exodus 19 and Exodus 20. All right, you with me? Let's go take a look. God's warnings for disobedience, Exodus chapter 19. And the Lord said to Moses, go to the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow and wash their clothes. So what are we talking about in this monument? They're saying that if you got a problem, you want to bring something, you want to clear the air, you want to wash your mind, come over here. We've got a place on the mount. Thunderhead. It says, for the third day the Lord will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. Take heed to yourselves that you do not go into the mount or touch the border of it, so whoever touches the mount shall surely be put to death. There shall not a hand touch it, but he shall surely be stoned or shot through, whether it be beast or man, and whether it shall not live. And when the trumpet sounds long, they shall come up to the mount. So when it's God, God is coming down into the mountain on top of this thunderhead, Mount Sinai, and he's going to take from the top, he's going to reach down, and he's going to tell the people what they should be doing, what is right, what is wrong. You're disobedient, you touch the mountain, you cross the boundary lines, you're going to die. Same way with God's holy word. You break the commandments, it's death. So now, Thunderhead in Canada now has taken a monument in type to bring it on top, put it on a mountaintop like a hillside, and lift it up for people to come and bring their voices to bring out deliberate disobedience to God's holy word. Let's go on. All right, so now we're in chapter 20. This is right after God had been giving them the commandments. And so all the people saw the thunderings and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed and they stood afar off. Here we have a thing that they have actually called thunderhead. Why would you take something that looks so innocent like this and call it thunderhead? It's because it's like throwing back in God's face what God did, and in deliberate defiance that we will do it our way. Going on. And when they saw, and they said to Moses, speak to us, and we will hear, but let not God speak to us, lest we die. And Moses said to the people, fear not, for God has come to prove you, and that his fear may be before your faces, that you sin not. So here we have again, look at verse 19. Don't let God talk to us. And here we are with a monument defying God. All the people can talk, but not God. There's not one thing in that Thunderhead Mountain that gives any glory, because you can't, to God. It doesn't bring up God at all. going on now. Let's take a look at it one more time. So now here's our picture, exact same picture. Now let's take a look at the defiance of the actual picture of what they're actually doing. You can see from this right here what's going on. So let's bring something up. You may not even caught it, pride. Every time you see something to do with the LGBTQ movement, it's always dealing with some kind of pride that we're going about. Look at Isaiah 3 verse 9. They show the countenance does witness against them. They declare their sins as Sodom, excuse me, and they hide it not. Woe unto their souls, for they have rewarded evil unto themselves. Now that's what God just told them in Exodus 19 and Exodus 20. Now here's the way of right and wrong. You take and you reward evil, it's going to bring about death. You give all the commandments. So now there's one more thing that's involved with this. You can't hardly see it, so let's keep that picture up for just a second, see if they can see it in the picture. There's a rainbow. So in the rainbow, they take into defiance, and even in their picture, so now we've got pride, we've got the defiance of the mount that God isn't going to speak to us, and now we're going to take what God has given mankind as a way that he wouldn't destroy the earth again for rain. Now they use that as a way to defy God again. That's found in Genesis 6. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repents me that I have made them. All right, so this is where God was destroying all the planet. He flooded it. We know that there was only Noah and his family, who actually went on the boat after 120 years of preaching. No one listened to him. And like God says, it was only in their thoughts to do evil. But then after the flood, God reduced the waters and started again. And then in Genesis chapter 9:13, he says, I do set my bow in the cloud, and there shall be a token of a covenant between me and the earth. So why do you think they use the rainbow as a symbol? That is another deliberate defiance against God. Is that like Satan is telling God, you can't flood the earth again. You have taken and you have made a promise to man. And so they use God's promise to man that they would never flood the earth again. Now, if you think that's a victory, think again. God's already on the ball and got it all covered. He says, I will remember my covenant which is between me and you and every living creature and all flesh, and the water shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. And God said to Noah, this is the token of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is upon the earth. And God will keep his word. He will not flood this earth again. So when you hear all the people who are talking about green is going to flood our earth because of the polar caps melting and the waters rising, it's all hogwash. The whole thing is built around a lie, because God just told us that isn't going to happen. But he's promised something else. Something else is coming, which is far worse than that. A baptism of water and fire. Luke 3, verse 16 and 17. And John answered and said to them, I indeed baptize you with water, but one mightier than I comes, and that the latches of his shoes I am not worthy to unloose. He shall baptize with the Holy Spirit and with fire, whose fan is in his hand, and he will thoroughly, purge his floor, and I will gather the wheat in his garner, but the chaff he will burn with fire unquenchable. So you can get by thinking you're going to defy God with the flood, but there's something far worse that God's promised coming. All right. Tried by fire. 1 Corinthians 3, verse 13, when God says, every man's work shall be made manifest, and the day shall declare it, because it shall be revealed by fire, and the fire shall try every man's work of what sort it is. Every word we speak, every thought we have, everything we do, God tries us now and purifies us, just like he does with silver, with gold. It's put under fire, and all the imperfections and impurities come floating to the top, and they just scrape it off, and what's left is perfection. God uses those examples for mankind. We see that in Psalm 66, verses 10 through 12. It says, "For you, O God, have tested us and tried us as silver is tried. You brought us into the net, and you laid a crushing burden on our backs. You let men ride over our heads, and we went through the fire, through water, and yet you have brought us out to a place of abundance." And that's what God's doing right now. He's bringing us through this trial so he can bring us to a place of abundance. We're talking about his kingdom. All right, let's move on now. Now, before I actually start this slide, I'm going to just close out the other segment. When we see something that puts so much emphasis on an anti-God, there's a purpose behind it. We need to take the time, and we're going to be doing that in God's Unchanging Word and News Nuggets and Insights, to begin to isolate those incidents and to show how evil they are. Because you see, the people today in this world, they don't have a clue what they're seeing and what they're doing. When you see these kinds of monuments in defiance of God, it is moving the mindset further and further away from any opportunity that God will use to bring in his truth. So that's why we're going through those today. So we took something that looked so innocent, but it was so evil, and went right to the roots of God's holy word, and to show you why this is dangerous for people to look at and to deal with. All right, let's move on. Systematic destruction of America. This is actually a segment that I brought up 1 year ago when we talked about America going under siege, and we used that as an example from a sermon series we gave years ago. Exploitation of our nation's resources. This is what we began covering a year ago. The COVID relief package, the opening of the border and showing how the potential dangers that was coming. Then we put on the radar talking about the Equality Act that was coming, that they're still trying to work on today. All right, that's where it doesn't matter what qualifications a person has, is they're going to make everything equal. That's a reason for that, because you see, the government that exists today has to be brought into an anti-government to be able to fight against Jesus Christ when he comes back. That's what we're moving into right now. We're moving into a time where the government systems that are lining up today are going to merge together to become, our president just said, a new world order. I don't know if that was a Freudian slip or he deliberately let that out the bag for what is coming, which actually lines up with God's holy word. All of these things is a new government forming, which is going to come together, and Jesus Christ says that at his coming, they're going to fight him. That's what we're looking at right now. So you're beginning to see that. If we keep it in that perspective, then we will realize where things are heading, because we've already been told from God's holy word. All right, let's go on now. Let's look at it 1 year later. Exploitation of our nation's resources. Illegal crossing of the new, in new records. It's coming across the border now. Reduced sentences for pedophilia. So I had to stop here and just show you something, because this is unbelievable what this government is doing. Is that this person being recommended for a Supreme Court justice who has to rule on law, right? On law, has taken a track record of law of pedophilia people and reduced their sentence and just had mercy and basically almost just turned them loose. There's record after record after record of ruling that way. And so now we want to take a person with that mindset, which is totally against the law, so that they can do what? Change the law. And so it's coming to where pedophilia is going to be legal. All right, I wanted to just stop there because there's a couple more things we want to look at, but I wanted to show that to you. We're going to cover that as we go forward. So now on the radar again, locking up our fossil fuels and out of control crime and anger. I don't know if you've seen how much crime is going on right now because the war is taking over everything. All right, a year ago, price of gas. I said this a year ago. It was up to $66 a barrel, and our gas was costing us 65 to 70 cents more a gallon. That was a year ago. That's child's play compared to this year. Everything was being set up, what's going on. Last year, I also said that if I filled my van up, it was going to cost me an extra $1,000 a year. I went and redid those figures today. I don't think I have it on here, but that $1,000 now is almost $3,000 for the year for the same amount of usage. So now let's move that out the way and let's begin to look at today. That was from March 12, 2021. From that time on, the gas has done nothing but rise, long before Putin in the Russian war. Gas on the average now is $106 to $115 a barrel. Just this morning, we tape on Tuesday morning, it actually broke below $100 again. It did that 2 weeks ago and went back up to $115. Gas on the average is $3.43 a gallon, and in some states it's $6 to $7 a gallon. All right, so that's costing everybody across the board. Now, there's one more thing we haven't covered here. You want to think about, if you haven't noticed, your utility bills are also going to begin skyrocketing if they haven't already. They're going to be just going up, up, up until they can get a balance because everything we have is based on fossil fuels, including our utilities. Now, let's take a look at this immigration issue that we have that's continuing to rise up. Title 42, which basically gives the government authority to send the illegals back out of the country, is now running out. It's going to be closed, and that means they're going to tell you that the law has no authority to take and send the illegals out of the country now. So they're going to begin to continue to keep more and more of the illegals in America. So that's what we're beginning to look at. That's putting an additional burden on the resources of the American taxpayer. The illegals in February 2022 sets new records, and this is not just according to the Post, this is all the news people. The February spike is a 63% jump in February of 2021. That says 63% rise, more this year than last year, but that's up 350% from 2020. 350% increase in 1 month in the last 2 years. Now, instead of sending people back, and they weren't sending too many back, they're going to be keeping pretty much everybody here. At present, the border agents, this is as of Sunday, the border agents say they're apprehending 7,000 people a day. This is in March, right now. They believe, because things are picking up and they can see them coming to the United States further from Central America or through Central America, they're afraid that it's going to rise to 16,000 a day. That would be like 400,000 people in 1 month. Multiply that through the course of the year, and we've got a Ukraine situation looking like child's play coming into America. It shouldn't surprise us because God warned us this was going to happen. Annual cost, we brought this up last year, was costing, for illegals alone, it was costing America $116 billion a year because of the cost of the illegals. For every illegal that commits a crime and is incarcerated, that cost was $34,000 a person. So every time they bring somebody in, they break the law, they go to jail, taxpayers are paying $34,000 a year. But wait, that's 2 years ago. They think today, we don't have accurate records yet, it's somewhere between $40,000 to $45,000 per inmate for every illegal they put in to house. The $116 billion, they don't have a clue yet how much it is, because everything rises every single day and every single month. God warned us that if we were disobedient, this is going to happen. Deuteronomy 28, verse 43. The stranger that is within you shall rise up above you, and you shall come down very low. Well, that's where we're at right now. And we're going to continue to watch the stranger that is among us get higher and higher as we are brought down lower and lower. What's absolutely amazing is that if you're in America, you have all these laws that restrict and draw from your resources. But if you come across the border, they don't have any laws against them. They don't even need to be tested for COVID. They don't have to be vaccinated. But here in America, we have all of these restrictions. And then we supply them with money to get established and to have businesses and to grow. I don't know. It just seemed like somebody in their right mind should be able to see this. But God says, because you chose to believe a lie, I'm going to send you a delusion. So the people who are in power and have the authority, they're living in a delusion that this is good, while they destroy the very nation they live in. What else is going on right now in America? Now, the news hasn't even reported this, but it's out there. America had a record 107 mass shootings in 2022. Did you hear about that? So what classifies a mass shooting? They talk about there's different ways to describe it, but in general, it's when at least 4 people are shot and either killed or injured, or all killed or all injured. It usually describes at least one dies. This year alone, and we're only in March, this is 3 months, there have been 107 mass shootings since the beginning of 2022. 65 of those were kids, and 280 were teenagers. 9 mass shootings just last weekend happened in America. The growing unrest across the nation will only get worse as the costs continue to escalate. What can we expect when the food supply begins to run out? All right, but before I address the question, what do we expect when the food runs out? Let's take a look at the Barabbas spirit first, because it tells us a lot. Let's go into Luke 23. When Pilate found no fault in Jesus, he was going to beat him and release him. When Pilate asked the crowd to release Jesus, they shouted, "Crucify him." That's interesting, what we're looking here, because you see, the person who's in charge, the authority, they had no issue. He can't find anything wrong with him. You notice today that the politicians bend to the mob mentality. That's why the minor, the minuscule, the percentage of less than 1% of the people are basically controlling the news media, which controls the government. So now we're in the position where they're shouting, "Crucify him," instead of releasing him, right? Look what Jesus' response in that same chapter was. If they do these things in the green tree, what will be done in the dry? In other words, if they hate this much, someone who has done them nothing, what will they do when they're under pressure, when they're under persecution, when they're out of food? That's the area we're moving in right now. So the question I just asked was, what happens when people run out of food? If we have this kind of crime going on right now, lootings, the burnings, murders, rapes, you name it, everything's up. What are they going to do when they get hungry? We're lining up for 2 governments, whether we realize it or not. I've told you about that before. Now, this Saturday, all right, tomorrow, if you don't have a service to go to, I don't know if we'll get the live stream. We're trying. Last week we had a good stream. But we're trying every week, and we're working on it with Cox, and they still get people out here almost every week. Not a lot's being done, but we did have a good stream. What I'm going to do tomorrow is I'm going to take a scripture where God says the government is going to be on his shoulder and show you why we're having such conflict right now. Because you see, Isaiah 9, 6, and 7 is the enemy of socialism. And we're moving into a socialistic government right here in America. So I'm going to cover that tomorrow. So if you have nowhere to go, try to tune in. If it doesn't get out, just sit tight. Don't let it frustrate you. Jeff goes home every Saturday. He reworks it. He takes a good copy from here and he puts it online, usually Saturday night or early Sunday morning. But one way or the other, we're going to get this information out to you. So now, let's move on. Henry Kissinger. All right, Henry Kissinger says, well, let me give you a little background on him. He was the National Security Advisor in 1969. He was also the Secretary of State in 1973. He was the one who helped bring it in the negotiation to the Vietnam War. This is a quote that he gave. You're beginning to hear it every now and then being percolated through the internet. Control oil and you control nations. control food and you control people. We're trying to address the question, what happens when people run out of food? Now, we've got a big problem because it's beginning to run out around the world, not just here in America. Former Vice President Pence just made this statement at a press conference. Chinese firms have expanded their presence in American agriculture over the last decade by snapping up farmland and purchasing major agribusinesses like pork processing and the giant Smithfield Foods. I don't know if you know it, but many of the processing plants here in America are owned by foreign countries, including China. By the start of 2020, the Chinese owners control about 192,000 acres in the U.S. worth $1.9 billion. This is a 10% growth of land ownership from 2012, including the land that's used for farming, ranching, forestry, and according to the Agriculture Department. So putting this in perspective now, the Chinese are owning the land that's here, the processing that's here, and they're controlling a lot of the fertilizer that's being brought into America to grow the products. This is unbelievable what we're seeing, that we're letting this happen to our own nation, that this is going on. So let's take a look at this. How do we prepare for these lean years? We began talking about this 3 weeks ago. What do we do when the shelves are empty and we run out of food? Well, you got a pretty good idea if you've lived in a hurricane city where the hurricane was coming, or you've been in the north where you've been through a town ravaged by tornadoes, or even ice and frozen areas in the north and out west with all the fires that are being burnt. You put all of these together and you see in a nation that's under a lot of pressure and a lot of stress that's going on right now. And more nations are coming in. Remember that sojourner that is among us getting high above us? It isn't just the foreigners coming across the southern border. It's even us right here in our own country that's allowing the country to be taken over, and they're getting high above us. They are controlling things that affect our lives. So we began talking about preparing for these lean years. Have you begun your preparation? Food shortages will begin to affect people's lives. We brought that out a few weeks ago in what I call a shock and awe news nuggets and insights to try to address this and push people to begin to put it on your radar that you need to start taking stock of your lives and where you're at. I even remember getting a phone call that said that, hey, that's a little over the top. Don't you think you overdid it? And I told him I did that on purpose. I said, we're going to bring balance into this, but I wanted to get people's attention because this is real. This is not just being made up. We came out with that March 11th just about 1 month ago. This is what we said you need to begin doing. Start with your dry goods and begin to order what you can. Of course, keep a balance on it because things are going to get harder to find and they're going to be a lot more expensive. They're going to be a lot more expensive as the time goes on. So we said that about a month ago. Now, today I want to bring something else for you to consider. This is something that you want to make your notes and put this into your planning process. If you're going to begin preparing things and purchasing things, how do you store them? All right, so there's things you want to begin educating yourself on, like blanching, canning supplies. You might want to get a vacuum sealer, a dehydrator for storing foods, and a home freeze dryer. Now, I'm going to play a video on that in just a moment, but I'm going to back up a little bit now because I'm going to explain what I'm talking about here. If you're growing food or you're purchasing food, what are you going to do with it? Because it only has a shelf life of so long. You can freeze it, but what happens if you run out of power? So you can blanch things and you can can things. You're going to have to make sure you have a way to get all that done. So what you need to begin doing, see, this is the preparing for lean years is not just a 1-2-step process. You're going to have to think this through. Because a person who lives in the South is going to prepare differently than someone who lives in Canada. Everybody has a different environmental issue they have to deal with. All of this is going to be brought into how you prepare short-term and long-term. So the reason I would get your dry goods going now, because you can order them, they're not going to spoil right away. Get that on the move to your home as best you can with whatever finances you can. Don't go out put yourself in debt or anything. Pick up a little here and a little there. If you go to the store, if you're normally buying a can of peas, let's say, we'll buy 2 cans. So things that you can begin, use up, store, use up, store. Remember to have it set up where you can rotate your supplies, because it only has a shelf life. Vacuum sealers gives you added length. Dehydrators gives you added length. But there's one thing that seems to be better than all of them. And this is what the companies use when you buy, if you went to a supply house for preppers, where you find these cans that's going to be a 25-year shelf life. How did they get to that? Well, they go through a process of freeze dry. You can do that at home. And here's why I'm telling you this today. This is not cheap to get started, but neither is buying anything with a 25-year shelf life. For a family of 1 for 1 year is about $3,000. You can get them a little less on sale, but that's basically what I found. So if you have a family of 4, you could be $12,000 for 1 year if you're trying to save all your food. So you need a balance. You need a balance. What if you get away from that and you start doing that yourself? So then you got growing foods, you got seeds that you're going to be storing, you got canning that's processed, so you got a whole lot of information. We're going to cover how you do that all later, but right now what I want to do is this. Don't panic when you look at this and you think of a price, because this machine is about $3,000. They might make them sell them cheaper, but you could go in halves with somebody. You could have a church group of 5 or 6 people who maybe can get together. Everybody can grow something and bring it together and work on this as a team, and everybody take a share. There's things you can think through. How do we get through the lean years? My process is to do this. Is not only to get us prepared, is to get you to work together as a team. How do we do this? One of the things we're working on right now, we're not ready, but I'm going to mention it today. We're talking about what's going to be called the Lean Years Trading Post. Is where we can have almost like it's as if it's underground, where church brethren can communicate one to another and talk about what they're doing to prepare, or what you might have a surplus of or have that this person doesn't have any, but they might have this. They can trade with you. This is not something that the church is going to be doing to buy and sell through the church. This is for God's people. That's what it's about. So we're working on how to get that accomplished. All right, so it's going to take us a little while to get it done. Any ideas you might want to have, send them forward. Lean Years Trading Post. All right, this is of the people, by the people, for the people. All right? And all we're going to do is make it available so everybody can communicate with each other. All right, so now, we got this video. It's about 6 minutes long. Let's play that, and then I'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Jackie with Harvest Right. Today, I'm going to take you through the entire freeze-drying process from beginning to end. From prep work, to packaging, to rehydrating, you'll see how fun and simple freeze-drying can be. It's a great way to preserve food for short-term or long-term use. Freeze-dry your garden produce, your leftovers. Buy when sales are on and freeze-dry to save money and to preserve the food your family loves. The benefits are endless. Keep in mind that nearly every food can be freeze-dried. From fruits and vegetables to meats, dairy, eggs, and even full meals like lasagna and beef stroganoff. Before we get started, let's turn on the freeze dryer to let it get cold. Okay, today I'm going to freeze dry scalloped potatoes and ham. I'll also freeze dry raspberries, apples, and ice cream sandwiches. Let's get these prepared for the freeze dryer. I'll start by spreading the scalloped potatoes on the tray. A good rule of thumb to follow is to fill the food to no more than the height of the tray. Next, I'll prepare the ham by laying nice thick slices on the tray. Try to keep the slices under a ½ inch thick. Now our fresh raspberries. I'm simply going to place them on the tray. The great thing about freeze drying is you can place more than one item on a tray. So on the other half of this tray, I'm going to put sliced apples. I sliced these apples with an apple slicer and gave them a quick dunk in lemon water. The last thing I'm going to show you are these ice cream sandwiches. I like to use small ice cream sandwiches that are in a cellophane pouch. I'll cut the top of each pouch and put the whole thing on the tray. The slit allows the water to escape from the pouch. I'll do it quickly so that I can keep them from melting. Because the freeze dryer is nice and cold by now, we won't have a problem. Let's slide the trays in the freezer. Put the door pad in place, turn the handle completely to the right, and that's it. It's that easy. This appliance is amazing. The freeze dryer is going to freeze the food 40 or 50 degrees below zero. Then the vacuum pump will automatically turn on and create a vacuum inside the chamber. The freeze dryer gradually warms the food, the water sublimates off as a gas, and the food dries. The process takes about 24 hours. When it's done, the freeze dryer will beep. The process is entirely automatic. We'll come back tomorrow and check out our food. Okay, it's time to check our food. The freeze dryer's been running for about a day, and you can see that the screen indicates the food is dry. Let's turn off the freeze dryer. I'll open the door and take a look at the food. The food looks exactly the same as when I put it in. It hasn't changed its shape, color, or flavor. I'm going to test a few of the bigger pieces to make sure that the food is completely dry. First, I'll look at the ice cream sandwiches. Since they had the most water in them, I will check to see how hard they are and if they're wet inside. The potatoes are dry and crumbly. The raspberries look like fresh raspberries. They are so good, and they're completely dry. The apples are beautiful. They're the same color, same shape, and haven't shrunk at all. And the ham is perfect. Meats are the easiest to freeze dry. Since there's no water left in the food, I'm ready to package and store it for future use. There are 3 things that cause food to go bad: heat, water, and oxygen. The freeze dryer takes all of the water out of the food while the food is still really cold. And the way to take out all of the oxygen is to put the food in a Mylar bag and add an oxygen absorber. You can also use number 10 cans or canning jars. All of these methods will preserve the food for many years to come. I've already labeled the Mylar bags. I include the date and a description of what's inside. So I'll take the ham, fill the Mylar bag, add an oxygen absorber, and seal it up. I like to do a double seal just to ensure that it's airtight. I'll do the same thing with the potatoes. My family loves to snack on freeze-dried fruit. Sometimes I store it in these glass jars, and sometimes I store it in canning jars. That way, they're easy to access for a snack. For long-term storage, I'll put the rest in Mylar bags, add an oxygen absorber, and seal them up. Raspberries and other fruits are delicious in cold cereal or warm oatmeal. I've powdered them and used them in smoothies and even to flavor cakes and frosting. Try using freeze-dried fruit in your baking. You can drop them in your muffin batter or your next cobbler. There are so many options. Okay, these are ready for your pantry or food storage room. For snacking, I put these jars of apples and raspberries on the counter or pantry shelf. The ice cream is amazing. It's delicious as a crunchy snack. I'm going to store some in Mylar bags and put some in a plastic bag to enjoy during the week. Your family will love these. Properly stored food can last up to 25 years.
25 years. Amazing. Now, I want to say that they used ham, of course, in the video that you just saw, but you can use any meat. It'll do the same thing. And fish, too, by the way. You can actually store fish. And as simple as adding water. when you put water back into, you mix it, it brings it back to life, and you got a meal. It's no different than if you spend $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 for storage foods from a supplier. But this way you get to pick and choose what you want. And if you grow it yourself, I mean, you can go right from your garden right to the dry freeze, and you'll preserve almost 95 to 100% of the nutrient. It says this keeps all the nutrient. When you begin to eat it, it's the most efficient way to store foods that's going to give you strength and vitality down the road. So I wanted to bring that to you. I didn't know if you were familiar with it. You don't panic when you see it. Game plan. Game plan, how do I accomplish these things? So many times in people's lives, they'll see a price tag and they'll say, oh man, I can't do that. Yes, you can. Find a way. Sit down, game storm with the brethren, with your family members, and figure it out. And then put it in God's hands to help you accomplish it. All the time you take in your preparation stages now will add to the longevity of your future down the road. This way you're not panicking. You're building just like Joseph did with Egypt for 7 years. So as the world begins to watch their food shortages, you're preparing for your shortages by storing what you need, trusting God that He's going to give you what you need to get you through what's coming. All right, one more thing I'll mention before I move on, before you seal, when you do this. I also recommend that you do a vacuum sealer. So before you put that oxygenator in, is do a vacuum seal. Not just seal it, but vacuum seal it. That will add more longevity and protection for the food at the same time. We're going to talk more about this, and each week I want to keep adding to what we're doing. So make your notes and be sure to stay tuned for next week. All right, now we're finished with our first segment. We're going to take another break, look at the Spring Holy Days when we come back, and we have another video here, the new year. So we'll talk about Spring Holy Days when we come back. Take a look at this video, and I'll be right back. Welcome back. Aren't those great little videos? All right, let's go in. Spring Holy Days now. All right, Spring Holy Days. This is, I brought this out before, so I wasn't going to take as much time today, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page and going into the Holy Days. The focal chapter, if you're new and this is your first Holy Day, if you're new to the church, Leviticus 23 is where you find all of God's holy days and tells us what we're to do. He says, speak to the children of Israel. Say to them concerning the feast of the Lord, which you proclaim to be holy convocation. These are my feast. The feast days that God calls them. The feast, according to Strong's, the Hebrew word means appointments, the moedins, and convocations, which means the feast of the Lord. They are the Lord's, not the Jews. So when you keep these days, your family might tell you, those are Jewish holy days. No. You know what I mean? These are God's holy days. He said, these are my feasts that I'm giving to you to keep. They belong to God. Even these are my feast. The convocations in the Old Testament is Strong 4744, means a public meeting, a rehearsal, an assembly, a calling, or a convocation. So when we come together, God says that on these days we're to have a meeting. And we rehearse basically what it is that they represent when Jesus Christ comes back. So these are the spring holy days, and this is God's calendar. So the God's calendar month begins in the spring when everything's coming to life, whereas man's calendar is in the middle of dead of the winter. So when we look at this, the very first month of God's calendar, which this year is April 2nd. So this is coming to you on April 1st, tomorrow being the Sabbath day, which is pretty unique, actually begins on the 2nd, April 2nd. Is the beginning of God's calendar year. In the first month of the year, you have God's holy days for the spring. You have Passover, unleavened bread, and eventually it goes into the first fruits of where we lead into the Feast of Weeks. Exodus chapter 12 says, you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. So what we would do is we'd begin counting from the Sabbath, which is the second 14 days, bringing you to April 15th. That's when they would have killed the lamb in the evening, which was the Passover. In the New Testament, we read, about the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which is to say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? So Jesus had cried with a loud voice, and he yielded up the ghost or his spirit. What we're looking at here is that Jesus Christ, as we know, was the lamb slain for us. So in the Old Testament, they rehearsed what was coming in the New Testament, which was Jesus Christ was going to be crucified. He was crucified at the same time they would kill the animal in the Old Testament. Now, there's a lot of disagreement in different churches about the timing of all this. I really don't want to try to use this segment to explain that. We've done that before. And if you go online, you can see the Exodus series. I go into a lot of detail with that. So what I want to cover today is the area that we're all in agreement with. How do we do it today? All right, so in Matthew 26, verse 17, it says, now the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying to him, where will you that we prepare to eat the Passover? Matthew 22:1 says, now the Feast of Unleavened Bread drew near, which is called the Passover. What is interesting in the New Testament, you have the Passover and unleavened bread kind of tied together. It became a one event, although in the Bible, it's two events. You have Passover, the very next day starts unleavened bread. So it became known in the New Testament as Passover, unleavened bread was all the same thing in the events. So you have to go back and decipher and separate the specific times, which we've done in other areas. In Matthew 26:20 it says, now when the evening was come, he sat down with his 12. So what Jesus did that we need to understand, knowing that on the next day, at the 9th hour, he was going to be on the stake and he was going to die, to give the disciples the instructions of instituting the bread and the wine, which is the body and the blood of Jesus Christ. Because once he was sacrificed, as Hebrews tell us, there's no more need for sacrifice. So what they would do is to keep the Passover, Jesus instituted the new symbols that maintain the covenant God gave them to keep in the Old Testament. So we keep the same covenant with God with the new symbols of the bread and the wine, because we're no longer going to be killing a lamb for our sacrifice. Jesus Christ, who was crucified once for all, doesn't need to do it every single year. So now he meets them on that night and he institutes the bread and the wine. The terms in the Passover unleavened bread were used interchangeably in the gospel accounts. Keep that in mind when you go back and read. The taking of the Passover. Why we keep Passover on the same evening that Jesus instituted the new covenant with his disciples. Now, the Jews, they have what's called the Seder. They're still keeping it the way they did it with the Old Testament. You killed the lamb at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then they would roast it that night and eat it that night. The Jews still do that today. So when we keep it, we're doing it the evening before. Why? Because that was the instruction that Jesus Christ gave us. It's found in 1 Corinthians 11, verse 23. For I have received of the Lord, which also I delivered unto you, that the Lord Jesus, the same night which he was betrayed, took bread. So what we're doing, just like Paul says, listen, he says, listen, I was taught by Jesus, and now I'm telling you, this is what you're supposed to do. On the same night in which he was betrayed, when was that? It was the evening portion of the 14th, still the 14th. When we take the bread and the wine on the evening that we take it, it is still the 14th. The instruction is the Passover is to be kept on the 14th. The only difference is the instruction for us is that we do it with the bread and the wine because the sacrifice the next day, still the 14th, would be no longer applicable. The night to be much observed. Exodus 12:8. And they shall eat the flesh then that night, roasted with fire, and unleavened bread with bitter herbs, and they shall eat it. Exodus 12, verses 10 and 11. Let nothing of it remain till morning, and eat it in haste. Deuteronomy 16. And the Lord brought you forth out of Egypt by night. Numbers 33:3. And they left Ramesses on the 15th on the morrow after the Passover. So those scriptures actually all tie in together. I recommend do a review, go back through each one of these scriptures. So we understand that they left on the 15th. They went out by night, and it had to be after the Lamb was crucified. So we today, we still observe this event. God said it's a night to be much observed. So we take the Passover on the evening of the 14th, and we observe the night to be much observed on the evening of the 15th. And we have back-to-back events that we take place in God's church. Creating the timeline, so basically it runs down to this. You have sunset, which is 6 p.m. It's approximately, it varies wherever you're at in the time of year. 6 p.m. subset, so that's a 24-hour period. Then you have sunrise, you have your night and your day. You have midnight, and you have noon. 13th, on the 14th, then you go all the way through to the 15th. There's the timeline of all these events all taking place from the 14th through the 15th. You have sunset to sunset, midnight to midnight, noon, and then you have your sunrise. All these events all lining up together in that time period. There's midnight. So if you were sitting down, you would draw your little graph. This is what you would be working from. The 14th through the 14th, from sunset to sunset. Sunrise to sunrise is another event. Jesus dies on the 14th at 3 p.m., the ninth hour. The ninth hour. Numbers 33:3 says Israel leaves Egypt by night on the 15th. So when sunset comes, they leave, representing they have been freed from bondage and leaving Egypt. Now, when you look at that, I went through that kind of quick, but I'd like for you to do something. Take that chart, hand make your own chart, it's not complicated, and then go through this. Here gives us an almost hour-by-hour remark of the scriptures, the timelines of the crucifixion day, and the leaving with Jesus Christ, and you will begin to see how the two parallel one over the other. And here's the second part of that, and it'll give you it's a nice study. It's a lot of fun to do. It's very informative. That you could take some time yourself to go through that. And in the meantime, you can go online, look at the Exodus series. It's a lot there. It's like 8 or 9 different chapters and different sermons giving you different aspects of the children leaving Israel. And you can take and look at a different one every day. And you might want to do that this year during the days of unleavened bread. Take one each day. They're only an hour long. And go through each one of them. And it'll give you different parts of the time of what was going on during the crucifixion. A lot of stuff to go look through, and it's very, very informative. All right, now let's begin to wrap it up. April 1st, 2022, from the home office. In the mail this week, going out, Lessons from the Past by Steve Council, and Jeremiah, the new series I just completed, part 1, in the mail this week, just went out. All right, let's wrap it up now. We got one more New Year video. Happy New Year 2022. Take a look, and I'll be right back. Wasn't that great? We saved that one for last. All right, that's it for our program today. But as you can see, what we're doing now is we're getting hands-on. We're getting ready. God said we don't need to be fearful when we see all these things coming upon mankind, that we need to look up. We need to hold our head high and know that Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior. And that when we meet Him, we're going to meet Him in the air. We're going to come right back and we're going to rebuild this earth that man is trying to destroy. And in the meantime, we're going to do everything in our power to hold up our end that God gave us to prepare for His coming. And we do that by getting close to Jesus Christ on our knees and in prayer and in communication with the brethren that God gave us. And we're going to be proactive to be prepared as best we can during the lean years. So let's all work together. Let's begin to prepare this, and let's give hope to a world that's dying, that has no hope for the future. That's it. Thanks to all of you. Thanks for being a part of this work. Thanks for helping support this work to get the word out to many, many people. We have grown a lot this year, but we've got a lot to do. Thanks again, and remember to share this with everyone you know. They're going to love you for it, or not. Till next week, God be with you.